Hi all, thanks for taking some time to listen to this screencast on pronouns. We wanted to make sure everybody heard this lesson because there's been some updates in how to address pronoun antecedent agreement. So here we go. So just some of the basics. When we're talking about pronouns help us to avoid being overly repetitive and redundant. So we don't have to say John went to the store, but John forgot to buy milk. Instead, we can replace John with he. So pronouns replace the nouns, but the trick is that we have to keep the same meaning. So thus we have to make sure they agree. The antecedent is the original noun. So in John went to the store, but he forgot to buy eggs, John is the antecedent and he is the pronoun. You can't have a pronoun without an antecedent because otherwise your listener or reader wouldn't know exactly what the pronoun was referring to. So antecedents and pronouns have to go together. And sometimes you can have unclear reference. So for example, when Alexander drove the car through the garage door, he badly damaged it. Your reader is left wondering, does it replace the car, the garage door? It's an unclear reference to the antecedent. So you have to be sure that you have clear pronoun antecedent reference. So let's talk a little bit about agreement. Your pronouns must agree with antecedent, and just kind of a helpful understanding of the word antecedent. In Latin, ante means before and sed means go. So it's essentially the noun that goes before the pronoun. In other words, the pronoun must agree with the noun that goes before it. You have to consider that pronouns must agree with antecedents in three ways. First is with person, so you have to maintain consistent first, second, or third person. The second is number, so that it must stay either singular or plural. And the third is with gender, so that it must stay male, female, or neutral, and this is where the rules have changed a bit, so we'll delve into this a bit more later. So let's talk about person. When students are ill, we will have to make up the missed assignments. Students is third person, we is first person, so we don't have agreement. We'd have to maintain third person with students and they have correct pronoun antecedent agreement. So you can't shift between first, second, or third person in your writing. When it comes to number and gender, pronouns and antecedents must agree in both number and gender. So, for example, you can't say when my cousins come over, he doesn't want to do anything but watch TV. Cousins are plural and he is singular, so we don't have an agreement in number. You could say when my cousin comes over, she doesn't want to do anything but watch TV. And we'll talk about this more later, but the only reason I can say she with certainty is because I know that my cousin is female identifying. So because I know this person and I know they're female identifying, then I can confidently use the pronoun she. Otherwise, this will change a bit if I don't know how the person identifies. I could also say my cousin comes over, he doesn't want to do anything but watch TV. Again, if I know that my cousin is male identifying. In both cases, the number and gender has stayed the same because it is singular and the gender is consistent. I could also say when my cousin comes over, they don't want to do anything but watch TV if my cousin was gender nonconforming. So this is where there are some new rules because we have to make sure that gender agrees with the preferred pronoun reference of the antecedent. In this case, I might have a cousin who is gender nonconforming and prefers the pronoun they. So here are some special cases. These are the cases that complicate pronoun antecedent agreement. We're going to go through each of the 5 of these. Let's talk collective nouns. We learned this back with subject-verb agreement, so here's a bit of review. But a collective noun represents a group or multiple people. The collective noun, however, is singular. So for example, the class, the Bahamas, the audience, it's a singular noun that represents a whole group of people. So it is incorrect to say the Bahamas does not have a firm plan for their tourism season. Even though the Bahamas represents a group of islands, it is one singular nation. Instead, you'd say the Bahamas does not have a firm plan for its tourism season. Similar to the subject-verb agreement lesson, the exception to the rule is if you are referring to multiple parts of a collective noun, then you have to use the plural pronoun. So for example, audience is a singular collective noun, but if I were to say the audience clapped their hands, I'm referring to multiple parts of the singular noun, and so now I shift from its to their because it's many hands that are being referred to. So again, while the audience is singular, there are multiple hands. So let's do a quick practice. Go ahead and pause, underline and label the pronoun and antecedent, and then make any necessary corrections if there is misagreement here. So in the first one, you underline the baseball team as the antecedent, it's as the pronoun, and hopefully you changed there to its because the baseball team is singular collective noun and we're only referring to one coach. After the 3-hour practice, the team headed to their air-conditioned homes. Hopefully you changed its to their because it's referring to multiple homes of the teams. They each kind of go to their different homes. So that one's a little bit tricky, but we're referring to multiple parts of the collective noun. The third one, the antecedent jury, should agree with the pronoun its because the jury came to one single verdict together. It's referring to a singular verdict, not a plural. So again, collective nouns can be a bit tricky, but essentially they're singular unless referring to multiple parts of the collective noun. Let's talk about indefinite pronouns. Indefinite pronouns are pronouns where you're not exactly sure what the pronoun is referring to. So the prefix in meaning not, definite meaning certain. Again, you're uncertain who the group or the thing being referred to exactly is. Singular indefinite pronouns, in the past, the antecedents take singular pronoun reference. So kind of formerly, any word like each, either, neither, etc., were all considered singular indefinite pronouns, meaning they're singular, we don't exactly know to whom they're referring, and so they would take a singular pronoun. So in the past, we would say each of the clerks does a good deal of work around his or her office because each is singular, right? Each of the clerks is being considered separately, so it's singular, and then his or her office would be the correct pronoun. However, this has changed recently. This is directly from the MLA, so this is a kind of sanctioned change in the grammar rules. Now, singular indefinite pronoun antecedents can use they as singular gender inclusive pronouns. So these same singular pronouns, each, either, neither, etc., can now take they as a gender inclusive pronoun because we don't necessarily know the gender identity of the people that we're referring to. So directly from the MLA, it says that both constructions such as his or her are often cumbersome and some writers find singular gender specific construction insufficient. Given that many people do not identify with a particular gender, so using plural constructions if possible is often the best solution, the most inclusive one, especially when you're editing someone else's writing because you don't know how the people identify. They also go on to say that writers who wish to use a non-gender specific pronoun to refer to themselves may prefer they and their. Likewise, writers should follow the personal pronoun choices of the individual they write about, if their preferences are known. They may be used in a singular sense according to a person's stated preference for it. So if you know that a person identifies as male or female, and you're referring to each person and you know that's the case, you could use the male or female pronoun. But if you're not sure, it's best just to default to their, even though those indefinite pronouns are considered singular. So here's our updated example. Each of the clerks does a good deal of work around their office. That way we're being sure to be gender inclusive of any of the clerks since we don't know their specific gender identity. So indefinite pronouns is antecedents. With plural indefinite pronouns, the rule is easy because they just take plural reference. The gender identity of the reference doesn't affect that because it's plural. So several, few, both, and many, those are always going to take plural pronouns. Both do a good job in their office. Plural indefinite pronouns as antecedents require plural reference. So we just talked about that. Okay, so indefinite pronouns as antecedents. Some indefinite pronouns that are modified by a prepositional phrase may be either singular or plural. So the pronouns some, any, none, all, and most can be singular or plural depending on what they modify. Again, this is a bit of review from subject-verb agreement. When the object of the preposition is uncountable, use a singular referent pronoun. So some of the sugar fell out of its bag. I'm using this singular pronoun its because sugar is not a countable amount. I can't say 1 sugar, 2 sugar, 3 sugar. It's just kind of a vague sort of quantity of things. So some of the sugar fell out of its bag. Sugar is kind of considered like one cohesive unit. So sugar is uncountable, so the singular referent pronoun is used. But if you can count it, then it can go either way. So some indefinite pronouns that are modified by a prepositional phrase may be either singular or plural. So some, any, none, all, and most can be singular or plural depending on what they're kind of modifying. When the object of the preposition is countable, you use a plural referent pronoun. So in this case, some of the marbles fell out of their bag. Now marbles is a countable unit. I can say 1, 2, 3 and count each marble separately, whereas sugar was just kind of this one cohesive unit. So now I'm going to choose to use the plural referent there. Some of the marbles fell out of their bag because they're each individual units that are kind of considered in a plural way, whereas with sugar, it was just sort of like one general unit of sugar. This one's a little bit tricky, but hopefully that makes sense. Okay, indefinite pronouns as antecedents. Let's see, talk about that. So let's pause and do a quick practice. Take a minute, pause the screencast, fill in with the blank, and then check your answers. Hopefully you got some of the pie lost its crust. Remember, some can go both ways, but it's modifying pie here, which is a singular non-countable unit. So you'd say its crust. Some of the pies lost their crust. Now some is modifying the plural pies, which is countable because there are many pies. So I would say their crust. Most of the student body liked its principal. So again, most can go either way. In this case, student body is a singular antecedent. So I'm going to replace its with a singular pronoun. None of the farm animals got their breakfast this morning. None can go both ways, but because there's multiple farm animals, we'll say their breakfast. And several of the marbles had lost their sheen. Several is plural, and so we use the plural pronoun there. All right, that one gets a little tricky. Hopefully you're still with me here. Let's talk coordinating conjunctions. Remember, coordinating conjunctions are fanboys that join or separate. So certain conjunctions combine or separate subjects. Anne takes two singular subjects and makes them plural. Bert and Ernie kidnapped their neighbor, Mr. Rogers. Whereas or and nor separates, just like it did with the subject-verb agreement. And just like with subject-verb agreement, the pronoun should agree with the last subject used. Neither Julia Roberts nor Demi Moore knows her own telephone number. We know that Demi Moore is female identifying, so we can confidently use the feminine pronoun her, as she is the last antecedent before the pronoun. Neither the teacher nor the students remembered their raincoat. Students is the last noun before the pronoun, so I'm going to agree with the plural there for students because there's multiple. Either David or Pat needs to pick up their assignment. Now, this is a tricky case. Pat is gender nonconforming, so we're going to respect that pronoun preference by using their instead of he, him or her, because that is the preferred pronoun that Pat uses. Even though Pat comes separate, I'm going to agree with that preferred pronoun. So go ahead and pause the screencast, do a quick practice. Hopefully you got neither the grocer nor the bakers received their. Their should match with bakers. Both the Alexanders and the Smiths. Their, because Anne brings together. Either Jim or Alex forgot their lunch. We knew that Alex was gender nonconforming, so we're using a gender neutral pronoun there. All right, let's talk pronoun case. So we need to know that there's different types of pronouns. You've probably noticed us using different ones along the screencast. There's subject pronouns. They do the action of the sentence. So I, you, he, she, it, or the plural we, you, they. Those pronouns can act as the subject. Object pronouns receive the action of the sentence. So they are receiving the action instead of doing the action. For singular, me, you, him, her, it. For plural, us, you, and them. So in addition to being able to agree, we also need to know when to use subject and object pronoun. So I would say he needs some chocolate. I would use the subject pronoun because he does the action of the sentence. And I would say, will somebody get him some chocolate? And I'd use the object pronoun because him is receiving the action of getting chocolate. So let's talk about some special pronoun cases. Anytime you have comparisons, you use subject pronouns. A comparison sentence compares two or more people or things, uses more than, less than, or as much as. So for example, she likes Halloween candy more than they. That's very awkward and we don't use that in conversational language, but if you were to complete the sentence, you would say she likes Halloween candy more than they do. So it makes sense if we drop the verb do that we would still use the subject. So remember, subjects compare to subjects. I am faster than he. Again, you'd say I am faster than he is. So drop the verb, it stays he. Um, let's talk about using and.